I Ooh, okay, I accept. Let's continue. And yeah, so it's good. It's good because they've locked down construction this time, which means I get a nice two week break, because I noticed during the lockdown I was working a lot harder for very little money with so much muddiness out there. So now at least we know what's happening. So that's the life of Sydney. No cars on the road, no traffic. Locked down but free, if that makes sense. What do I want to get out of it? Tools to take on my little journey of freedom over the next week when there's no one out and about and I go and get lost in the bush. Henry, how do you feel and what do you want to get out of today?
Thanks, Philemon. Feeling good. Yep, we're organised, we're set. Got my computer sorted. Just looking forward to the call, seeing what comes out of it.
Hey, Henry, promise me you won't give me crap if mine falls out.
I don't do that anymore. That was the old days, eh? You know, where it just comes back to people's space.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, it's their responsibility, just the same as I go to my customers. I go, well, this is what we do. And if they don't buy, I go, that's okay. It's your house. I don't have to live here. Okay, Catalina, how are you feeling? And what do you want to get out of today's call?
Thank you, Henry. I feel grateful because I've had a bit of a genuine, full-on human experience, which means that I've gone through a lot of emotions. A week or so ago, Kelly asked us to ask you about a rabbit, but right now is not the right time, I think. Something about rabbits. So yeah, just after going through a bit of a range of different emotions, just for the sake of how the energy is moving right now, and not only the country here in Australia, but in the world, I've settled myself again, and I'm glad to be here to be part of a group that is very accepting and welcoming and loving, regardless of where we are in the world. So what I expect to get out of today, less technical difficulties.
Me too.
Just another good day of learning and understanding comprehension or something. Yeah, I'm always open to something. So that's me. Pete, how do you feel? What do you expect to get out of today?
Thanks, Kat. I'm feeling pretty good. What I am expecting to get out of today is I think I've already got a level of clarity around design, but I welcome the ongoing exploration of it. And it seems every time we have these Sundays, I come away with a deeper level of clarity about it at the moment. And that's good. And then trying to apply that into my life and business is the fun part. Susan, how do you feel and what would you like to take away today?
I feel extremely grateful, and I would like to lean into this experience of community with a group of people that are focused on solutions and not just complaining about problems. Roffers, how do you feel and what would you like to get out of today?
Thank you, Susan. I feel great. I'm happy that Jelly managed to get his call on the right track. That's your new name, according to Henry Kelly. So always grateful to be here and just enjoy the fact that we can go through technical problems and still have a sense of humor about them and sort them out. I mean, that's what we do all the time anyway. So happy to be here, happy to be ready to learn. And what you expect to get out today is, again, more understanding and more application, as we always do on this code. So that's how I feel, and that's what I expect. MC hasn't gone yet.
Joseph.
Oh, Joseph. Hello, Joel. How do you feel and what do you expect to get out today?
Hi, Raffers. I feel great, and I feel very fortunate to be here with everyone today. And I'm looking to get a little bit better understanding, advance my understanding about boundaries specifically. But just to learn from everybody and hear about everybody's different experiences with Bucky. Manu, has Manu gone?
No,
Manu.
it's your guy.
So Manu, how are you doing? What would you like to get out of today?
I was frustrated, but anyway, I'm grateful that at the nick of time, I could get into this meeting. I'm happy there are new faces. It means probably our boundaries is changing. What I expect is really explore further in terms of design, see how dynamically we really adapt to today the thoughts that have been around into achieving teleologically things that help our social, that help our being, that help elevate the condition of human beings around, and also that is in phase, or that in that is in the environment. So that's how I feel, and that's what I expect. Is it Kelly last?
Yeah, you can come to me and then I'm going to introduce Anne.
Hi, Kelly. How do you feel? What do you expect?
Well, I feel absolutely grateful that Anne showed up today. I just put her email on just as a by the by, because Anne sent me an email last week and said, oh, it's 4 years and we haven't caught up for a while, so let's catch up. And to me, that's just lag. I always say people come and go, and it's just what it is. But Anne has a very special group, and she educates in chemistry and other things in her schools. And she can tell you the story about her schools, but let me tell you, this woman is dynamic and genius. So, Anne, how do you feel, and what do you expect to get out of today?
Thank you, Kelly, for that introduction, and hello, everybody. I feel I'm ready. Okay, I wasn't about 4 or 5 years back when we had a number of meetings and visits and calls with Kelly, but when I connected with you again and started talking, and right now we're ready as a whole school, as a whole group of people. I think I have a structure that's ready to take this on, yeah, Kelly. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, so she's very modest. She has influenced thousands of students. So it's a privilege to have you here, Anne.
Thank you, thank you.
How do I feel? Well, I feel grateful. I got a call last night about 10 o'clock, and it's my daughter all shaken up and, oh, somebody's hit me. And they sideswiped her and they turned her car around. So she was most upset, but this morning it's a new day and she's all fine. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm also, as we go into this exploring design, I'm starting to realize that in real terms, there is a 2021 design issues that are very different to when he wrote these design positionings. And last week, when we were talking about information, I suddenly realized that we had to add other words to his 40 words. And I started reviewing his 40 words, and I got them, and I thought to myself, you know, we can't go past what we did last week on information without really studying boundaries and signals. And I think it's important that we understand that from a design point of view, is what are the boundaries? What are the signals that are going on? What's creating our awareness around it? And, you know, for a long time, I always believe that if you study Fuller, you've actually got to study what he studied. Because just reading Fuller, you're getting Fuller's explanation, but you may not really understand what's going on in the greater world. And so for me, I've always been curious enough to say, okay, well, that's what he's saying. What's everyone else saying? And I tend to go with some of the people he recommends, like he talked about systems, and I looked at the people he recommended. And then I found other people by doing that, and I found that they were more current, because I do have an awful lot of problem with the words that Fuller uses. And I understand where he's come from in terms of the words that he uses, but I think the language that he uses is always the same. If people understand the distinction between the words and the language. I mean, his language really was about all of us being in the same boat, all of us spinning together, and all of us doing well together. That never changes in his writings, but a lot of the stuff that goes through the writings and the validation of what he's saying is really important to me. So I've read a couple authors that I read, and I think it's important that in design that we look at these guys, because these guys are, in every case, are the best in their field. So, and anyway, we'll start and we'll look at it, and we'll just let her rip from there. Is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Joe, you're on deck, mate.
The transistor, oh, what is information? What is information? What are boundaries? What are signals? What is complexity?
So before we start, can you see why I've got those four? And if we're measuring them from micro to macro, how would we order them? What do you think, Manu?
That's the minimum system to study this.
Yeah, that's the system. But in these four words, which ones would be the macro words and what would be the micro words?
Information, the macro.
Okay, so information, macro. Any other thoughts about what would be the macro?
Signal.
Yeah. Signals.
Signals.
No, they would have boundaries. Complexity.
And you see, it's really very hard to decide right now, isn't it? Because in my mind, it's signals.
Information, signals, complexity, boundaries.
You see, when we talk about information, information is stuff that we relate to.
Yeah.
But aren't signals in cycles in universe?
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, the macro has got to be signals and boundaries, information and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I would say, if I had to take, 4 other words that are at least, kind of similar to this, I would say information energy, boundary space, signal exchange, complexity will be all the kind of radiative combining and recombining.
Yeah, complexity is when you get into all the precession.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now in those 4, I don't know, I still kind of
write them in
the macro. The macro will be information, because information is always there and is always flowing, and is always flowing to the point of this resistance.
Okay, so now you just put boundaries macro.
Yes. What did me
Because you're
boundaries?
saying the information is there, but the information is noticed by the boundary.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, when I put these 4 words up, I was trying to think, how do I put them up? So from a design perspective, we go macro, micro. So Manu, would you write in the chat box what you said around the other 4 words? Because don't forget, we're looking for the dual tetrahedron, which is what you just did, right?
Yes.
And so when I'm looking at that information and saying, okay, where to me, I have to have a boundary.
Yes.
And then I go boundary, signal, information, complexity.
Yeah.
Thoughts or comments?
I do it the other way around.
So which way did you think?
So I get the information, I feel the signs, the signals, basically after I've got all that information. Then I look at the complexities of what I'm trying to execute, but I put a boundary around them and then I go to work.
Yeah. So in saying that, when you look at the information, how's the information created?
Information's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's radically created. It's all over the
Within
place.
space.
Hence why I would then look at the signals of what I'm trying to achieve, or the path or the road. And then, yeah, based on the information, just to then find the information after it erratically appearing everywhere as it does.
See, to me, information, the way we gather information is important from the point of view of now we can make it relevant and we can bring it into our world and apply it.
Mhm.
And it's already there.
Mm.
It's already there in the form of a signal that we've learned how to understand, manage, whatever you want to say, but we didn't create the signal. What we did was measure a signal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Great.
again, it's like information is really very important to us, especially in today's world. And that's what this conversation is about. This is about how we worked it out and how we're now in a very, very different world since the late 60s to today. Go ahead, Manu. You were going to say something?
Yeah. True, we measure signals, but information signal is as energy space.
It is, but it's only what we choose to measure. What about the signals we don't measure?
Yeah.
What? But they exist. They are there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's macro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we measure is actual fact is fundamental to design. That is what we say, setting aside. We measure things that
Information
allows
setting
us
aside.
to segregate, yes, to set aside and focus.
Set aside within a boundary.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so when we're looking at this thing, I couldn't go past, like last week was very important and very pivotal because we started talking about information. And when you look at it, information is so fast today and it's so redundant very, very quickly. And so when we look at it, we're saying, are we able to measure more signals? And are we able to distinguish more cycles because of the measurement of the signal?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think, Susan?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with Raffers. Absolutely. And the rate of acceleration is accelerating. So it's going to be important to understand how to sharpen boundaries.
Or how to say everything without saying anything? Because the signals are all there. If you look at, if we applied it to your world, Philemon, sorry. If we applied it to the world of construction and we started to say, on this day, we created this concrete with the real bar in between. And now all of a sudden, as that thing's there, it's receiving signals, right? Whatever you want to call them, it's receiving something that ages very quickly. And so at that moment, we're seeing the boundary of the concrete, the real bar, and the effects of all the signals. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Philemon, does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. And it ties into the way I was thinking it in the boundary, complexity, signals, information, just in my head, the way it is in my head.
Yeah, and again, that's important to acknowledge the importance of all of those. They work together, processional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start moving through it. So now you can start, Joe.
The The transistor sparked the revolution in electronics, setting the technology on its path of miniaturization and ubiquity, and soon won the Nobel Prize for its 3 chief inventors. For the laboratory, it was the jewel in the crown, but it was only the second most significant development of that year. The transistor was only hardware. An invention even more profound and more fundamental came in a monograph spread across 79 pages of the Bell System Technical Journal in July and October. No one bothered with a press release. It carried a title both simple and grand, a mathematical theory of communication, and the message was hard to summarize.
Okay,
But it was
so at that moment, what are you picking up from what's going on right here?
Telephone.
So he's contrasting hardware with what I think people in our day and age would consider to be in the realm of software. But back at that time, nobody had any concept of what a software piece might be.
So as he's saying, at that moment, we discovered this thing called transistor, but now we had to work out how to apply the transistor.
Yep.
Right? Because you've got all this stuff going on. And they're saying at that time, it was such a profound, because it was a real ever more, ever less, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
And
definitely.
so, and at that moment of this ever more and ever less. And then you've got in this thing, this is really, in my mind, very important to understand the 50s, 60s, 70s, this is Bell system. Because some of the smartest patents and some of the best information was coming out of Bell Labs. And so you got these guys that developed the transistor, they're winning a prize, a Nobel Prize. And then in the background, you've got somebody that's thinking, how do I apply this? So what does that tell you about that group of people?
They're entrepreneurs.
Yeah, they're entrepreneurs, they're risk takers at that moment, but are they really entrepreneurs or are they scientists?
Both.
They were plugged into design.
Absolutely plugged into design. And so at that moment, I doubt whether they even thought of themselves as entrepreneurs or risk takers. They were just following the information. They're just following what's in front of them. They're cooperating with it and collaborating.
Yes. And I would say, sorry, that is fundamental, because between the entrepreneur and the pure scientist in there, the ability to take advantage of everything that has been going, because known or unbeknownst to them, there have been things since Lady Lovelace, and other things. They are just happening. And that was a movement going on. And it's very important that the two happen almost at the same time. That the quantum jump between the diode and the transistor happened 47, 48. And Shannon, I mean, you don't just think that because there was a transistor, Shannon just happened to have that light, bolt of designing a language of communication, a theory of communication. No, he's been working on things that happen. It's been waves and waves of those things happening.
Yeah, and so Lovelace was in the 1820s or something like that, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So now you're starting to see they're starting to speed out in all the stuff that's happening. And you see the language of entrepreneur, even though it's an older word, the word entrepreneur is that accelerated in its definition.
Hmm.
See, we talk about entrepreneurship. I doubt very much whether the Bell Systems were talking about entrepreneurship.
I was thinking about it in terms of Shock Blues Lab and Robert Noyce in that group that went out to the West to start the essentially what became Intel. That's why I was thinking entrepreneur in that group.
Yeah, they were the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, the Treacherous Eight or whatever they were called.
Yeah, so if you look at that from that perspective, but they're the people that really started to bring the word entrepreneur to the fore. The entrepreneur is about risk taker. And so when you look at it and you look at the funding of that, who funded Bell Systems?
AT&T.
Yeah, who really funded it?
The government.
US taxpayer.
The US taxpayers funded most of the Bell Systems work. And then the entrepreneurs came in, and what did they do with Bell Systems work?
Monetize it.
They're the monetizers. So when you're looking at it in 47, I doubt whether anyone even began to understand what was going on. And then very quickly it happened. And you know, this a mathematical theory of communication, really, what has that done for us?
Say
Let's
again,
open up
Kelly.
the world.
The mathemathetical communication, what has it done? The very fact that Shannon had worked that out is why we're on this call.
Yeah, it's how technology is built on technology and science is built on science. And even the people who won the transistors, I can't remember the name of the people, but the guy who took TV technology to Germany so they could have TVs for the 1936 Olympics, he didn't have transistors, but he had what was the precursor to transistors. And the technology of transistors had been built upon in a wave of procession by both scientists and entrepreneurs. And that's how humanity has advanced. We build something and it becomes a building block for the next generation advancement, evolution.
Type 2 evolution moving towards type 1 evolution.
Yeah.
Could you clarify that, please, Susan? Because I didn't fully get it the other week.
To say, explain it, because that's Fuller. That's a very Fuller statement.
And I think I sent it to Steve and Joe in terms of, I pulled down my critical path book and found the page number. But basically type 2 evolution is humans doing all the right things for all the wrong reasons. And it looks and feels like chaos. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to everybody, a boundary is crossed and it becomes type 1 evolution in terms of it changes the paradigm in such a way that it really moves society forward. I would say society, maybe you could say Homo sapiens, all beingness, potentially. It maybe moves them, you know, obviously there's some backward movement for some parts of the planetary biosphere too, but.
So when you're looking at that, Joseph, now start to think about, you know, where did Shannon end up, and where did your what would you call them, 8?
Robert Noyce and the Fairchild Corporation and all that. Yeah, the Treacherous Eight.
Yeah,
or something like that.
They're into the billions and billions worth of worth, yes, in terms of money.
Yes. Yeah.
Shannon ended up being was a club guy, and he'd go and listen to jazz music with hardly any money. He was a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see that, and at the moment, you look at a lot of the stuff that's moving forward now, and we talk about what's going on today, but there's a lot of stuff that's been brought together for it to happen today. And then the people that take the credit for today are the people monetizing, not necessarily the people looking at what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now when we're looking at this thing, we're saying, okay, we've now got into this idea where words are leading us, And now all of a sudden you've got mathematical theories of communication. We've always had mathematical theories, but now we've said, how can we communicate and be very practical with it in numbers? Does that make sense? So now let's go down and let's start working out exactly how we worked it out.
But it was a fulcrum around which the world began to turn. Like the transistor, this development also involved neologism. The word bit, chosen in this case not by committee, but by the lone author, a 32-year-old named Claude Shannon. The bit now joined the inch, the pound, the quart, and the minute as a determinate quantity, a fundamental unit of measure. By measuring what? A unit for measuring information, Shannon wrote, as though.
Okay, let's just go at that. So now what's happened?
Calibrating.
It's calibrating.
Oh,
So now we've got a word that calibrates. What's the word that calibrates?
Bit.
Bit.
Yeah.
And so now you're saying, okay, so we got this word bit. Now let's start calibrating.
Yeah.
And let's start measuring. And so as we start measuring.
And this is, Kelly, this is very important in that, for example, if you trace the parallel with energy, information is not some ether. It's a quantum. It's been able to define a quantum that is measurable. And the same thing as in the early 20th century as a theory of quanta in terms of energy. We talked the other day about Einstein and his paper in 1905. That is, he defined the Brownian motion in terms of quanta that you can measure on his photoelectric effect. And that is the same kind of things going on here. There is something that was information. We are aware, we are unaware, but it's there. And here is a method, a system to calibrate it in the form of a language that Claude Shannon kind of formalized.
Okay,
formalizing.
so exactly what's being said right there. Just finish off the statement, as though
there were such a thing measurable and quantifiable as information.
Which is what Manu just said.
And this is where Roffers becomes so important. People have now invented a word, and a word is a leading indicator, and it allows people to begin forming thoughts in this new direction. And so I love it that it just popped a brand new word.
And with that brand new word, there's all kind. Your 8 did very well with those words, Joseph.
Yes, they did, and that really speaks to the importance of naming something as well, or what it means to name something.
Well, and that, but also the acceptance. Like he didn't go to a committee. He didn't go. He just said, "My word is bit."
Right.
And because nobody else understood what the heck was going on anyway, they said, "Okay, let's have a bit."
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it, this is the mathematical theory of communication in 1948. So let's go through that and see how stunningly similar it is to what Fuller's talking about.
In his 1948 paper, Shannon listed the parts of communication system as information source, transmitter, channel, receiver, and destination. Information source, transmitter, signal, received signal, receiver, destination, message, noise source. I'm sorry, I missed that. Figure 1, semantic diagram of general communication systems from a mathematical theory of communication.
So this is his schematic. This is his drawing.
Schematic. Oh, forgot. I'm sorry.
And so this is his drawing of the way he thought about it.
Mhm.
So what do we have? Information. And we have, it's being transmitted now. So we now have a signal. We receive it, receiver, destination, all of those things. That fits in very nicely with what we've been talking about for years. What do you think, Manu?
Yes. Yes. I was just thinking about noise source here as what's going on around
Yeah,
in the
Right.
background.
That's the thing that sticks out for me the most. As soon as I saw that without reading it, I just followed the arrows and I looked at, I'm tying it into something else here, but precession's sitting at 90 degrees. I'm a bright, shiny objects person. And sometimes when I'm reading the noise source, I'm seeing it as a distraction. But in my life, I see it as well, it's sitting at 90 degrees and it just caught my eye there. That's all. And is it written in a negative context, the way it's positioned in this flow here? I know I've changed the conversation a bit, but it's just what stuck out to me, the 90 degrees.
yeah.
I would think about it as a sphere that has a radius. So you can only, it's a two-dimensional sheet of paper that he wrote this on. But I would think of it as a three-dimensional sphere around that center point. And yes, could be at 90 degrees from any point out to the edge of the sphere in a radiative fashion.
Comments or questions?
Okay, I have a question, yeah. Making sense of this. First and foremost, the whole statement of a mathematical theory of this communication in itself is an oxymoron, yeah. I find it's an oxymoron. It's like the polarity that you're talking about, because this is also exactly what happens in education, where they have pulled the two completely apart, and it doesn't link. So when I see the statement, I mean that the mathematical theory of communication, I was like, wow, you pull both science and the human component together in one statement, and it's completely missing in the math curriculum that you see across the world, right? So and then when I look at it also is that the issue with education around the world is that it starts from small and it goes big, and it doesn't sit well with the way the mind of the human mind works, right? Because, and I find that the students generally don't thrive starting from bits of information, and they have no clarity at all, and then we want to lead them into something big, but they're already very, very totally bored by the little bits, you know. So when you're asking about what is bigger and leading down to what is macro leading into the micro, this is based on looking at dealing with students for 35 years, from little ones all the way to college and so on. I find that the macro is the world, is this bigger thing, and the world is complex, right? But when it gets simplified and it starts from there, that's where it doesn't work. We start, so for us, the education that we've created system, we start actually from the end of where it is right now, where people can see, or the end can be a bit more into the future, where we can predict, right? But because we generally don't do that, it starts from the beginning. I'm trying to make sense of this whole thing with the discussion. So complexity, I find, is the macro, and then because that's how we see the world, right? We see the world complex, and then only it comes down to the signals as to what information to get. You know, like somehow the brain tells us what to find, you know, and then we pick up on this, we pick up on that, and it starts to link into this complex world. And then from there, only do we look for information, you know. And I don't know how to fit boundaries there, but the boundaries is using information in creative ways. So this is from an educator's perspective, and I'm just putting out there to try and make sense of this.
Comments
Yeah,
or questions?
And really, really, really insightful. I think it would help if you have been in here in this space a few weeks ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, we didn't benefit from your insight. But what we got was we are in between. You always start this process with macro in terms of design. Then there is micro. Then there are relevancies. Relevancies are in between. And relevancies stem from the process of division. So you have macro, micro, we are in between. And in terms of design, there are relevancies. Relevant doesn't mean that it's not important. It's just the thing that we set aside in order to funnel, in order to measure, in order to channel the energy that flows. Energy always flows between things. It always flows between things. And complexity is not in the macro. Complexity stems from the divisions and the relationship and interrelationships of parts. So if you have been going to think about education and you just take a plunge into the education as it exists today, yes, there's going to be complexity. And I will add that complexity is in the eyes and the mind of the beholder. And chaos, especially. Whether it's chaos, it doesn't mean that it is chaotic. It just means that things are happening, that you are in the state of complete apprehension. So that is a little bit that I will put there, but thank you again for your intervention.
Yeah,
So, go ahead.
One thing I find missing here is actually that Homo sapiens, as we transmit and receive, we get into coding and decoding. So that means we have a source, and as a transmitter, I gather that information, I transform it into a code, and I send it to somebody else, and then somebody else receives the signal, decodes the signal, turns into a message. So the message is in code. I mean, that's how we operate, and that's how language becomes so important as an instrument or a tool, as Becky described it, to actually carry information. And it all starts with a vibration and a wave that goes from one end to another and is transformed and becomes something else in the process as well.
Okay, so in saying that, if you're looking at from a fuller perspective, what are the dualities?
Oh yeah, the several here. You have source,
The other one's the
destination.
receiver.
The source and the destination are a duality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Transmitter and receiver are duality.
Yes.
Yes.
And then you have the noise source, which is the single bond looking or
Yeah.
supplying.
And again, you have coding and decoding. That's another
Putting
duality.
going on. Does that
I would say noise and storage is another duality.
Storage and retrieval.
Storage now becomes the information that we have accessible to apply.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So when we're looking at that goes in is information source, out is destination, and between is transmitting and receiving as between and around.
Yes.
That's
Agreed.
why it's important to have in, out, between, and around. And to me, that's what this diagram says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the out could be the transmitter and the in could be the receiver.
The noise is always going to be around.
Yes.
Yes.
It depends on which perspective you're sitting at.
Well,
True.
but our perspective as a beingness is transceiver.
Transceiver, exactly. We do both.
We do both. It's
Yeah.
like, so at that moment, That's why it's so important to say you can't have one, in our case, you can't have one without the other.
Yes.
That's
There's
what
no me without you.
duality. What's that?
There's no me without you.
That's exactly the point, right?
Mhm.
So the gift that we have is we're transceivers.
Mhm.
Yes.
Comments or questions?
Yeah. I think this diagram depicts it. You know, we shouldn't be fixated to the linearity of it. No, it's not. That's not what he's saying. We should look at information as loops and cycle going on.
Yeah.
So it's very spherical here. I mean, the one way of seeing it is like this, you know, information source to destination, and then noise around like this. And all of that defines space in between, space within a sphere.
Is it spherical or spiral?
Spiral.
Spiral.
Yeah, it is spiral.
The movement is spiraling and the boundary is spherical.
Yes.
Yes.
Comments or questions?
Why is the boundary spherical again?
Because,
Okay,
go ahead, Manu.
let's just take an experiment, Joe. Just take balls, plastic balls, red, yellow, blue, and just imagine them, or your inflate balls of different color, different sizes, and just put them on top of your pool and let your pool pump run and see what happens between those.
Mhm.
Yeah. So those are packets of energy that you have floating there, and then you have the motion of water going on in the pool, and you're going to see the exchange.
Mhm.
They're exchanging first at the boundary because they touch like this, and then they're rolling, going around, and then if your information were the yellow balloons, look at, or the yellow balls, look at the way the yellow balls are going to move, because that's your flow of energy within the whole set of blue and white and all the other colors. And your pump, your motor, your pool pumps running and water circulating. Quite interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to another thought, which is boundaries and signal.
Signals, yes.
Signals and boundaries of ecosystems, government, biological cells, markets, and complex adaptive systems in general are characterized by intricate hierarchical arrangements of boundaries and signals.
Okay, so what's being said there?
Rules.
Yes.
And who's making the rules?
Whoever's driving it.
Yes.
Say that again, Henry, I missed it.
Whoever is driving the system.
Yeah, who's ever driving the system, thank you. So when you're looking at it, we're putting all these things in, and it's our ability, it's our gift. And that's why we talk about, Manu spoke about storage and retrieval.
Actually, when it comes to language,
Aggregation and re-aggregation.
yes, and when we use language, actually, we build the rules collectively.
Mm.
We build the
People
rules
agree on the rules.
by tacit agreement.
Yes, exactly.
And
But
that,
those agreements are prior again, are prior to the play. You don't come to the final of a World Cup, put the two teams and say you are going to negotiate the rules. No. Rules are already part
Already
of
there, actually.
the system in place.
Yeah, the rules can change as well.
Yes.
no, but now you got to distinguish between rules and principles.
Right.
Yes,
Principles can't change, rules can.
Well,
exactly.
we change the rules and eventually what Fuller's saying is you'll get to the principles. That's what Susan's saying, class 1, class 2.
Yes. And when it comes to language, actually,
But-
there's a
But rule in that sense, Kelly, is what you call arbitrage. The
Mm, yeah.
process is going, there are issues, you make rules. I mean, you don't make a revolution, you make rules.
Yeah, but now arbitrage, the way you're using arbitrage there is really a very economic word.
No, I don't want to use it that way. I want to say,
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
in saying that it's arbitrage, then we have to have a really good understanding of arbitrage.
Mhm.
Give us your definition of arbitrage.
well, let's just say I come at a fork. I'm flowing from one point to another. I come at a fork, I have to decide where to go. Do I take the high road?
Bifurcation or arbitrage?
Pardon?
Is that bifurcation or arbitrage?
Well, that was the sense I wanted to use.
Okay, so what you're saying, it starts to divide off and split and move in different spirals.
There's something else here as well, because signals can be missed. And when you pick up on the signals that were missed before, then boundaries change the minute we get more signals, and that impacts the rules.
Yes.
Okay.
Say again, Anne, please.
Signals can be missed. And so when we pick up on more signals that may not come our way or may be missed, then the boundaries get affected by it, could change accordingly. And then and that impacts the rules as well.
Yes. That is what you call dynamic adaptative.
Okay.
Are the
Thank you.
boundaries the same as principles in this particular instance?
Well, the boundaries are heading to a veritas, to a truth.
Okay. And so a principle would be a truth, correct?
Well, ultimately, that's what Fuller's saying. You're going to get to that point.
Okay.
Manu, you have a thought on that?
I would say that, principle relate to relations. And it is what is the relation that is true everywhere and everywhere. That's the principle.
Well, the thing
If,
about
for example,
think about a principle at that moment, you've got to think a principle is always there.
yeah,
It was always there, and we're discovering it through veritas.
yeah.
So when
So
you
veritas is a process
yes,
from within of discovery of those principles.
which is the point Anne was making, I think.
Yeah.
You have a slight change in, the rules are going to change with that. And when you look at these systems, what this guy is saying is it doesn't matter what it is, there's always going to be boundaries and signals. And then it's how each individual, and that's why, with 7 or 8 billion people on the planet, all with their different experiences, now you're getting something very different. Anyway, let's keep going, Joe, so we can get through this.
Sure. Ecosystems, for example, have highly diverse niches with smells and visual patterns as signals. Governments have departmental hierarchies with memoranda as signals. Biological cells have a wealth of membranes with proteins as signals. Markets have traders and specialists who use buy and sell orders as signals. And so it is with other complex adaptive systems. Despite a wealth of data and descriptions concerning different complex adaptive systems, we still know.
Stop there. Comments or questions?
I'd like to have a look at that. Market have traders and specialists who use buy and sell signals and sells order as signal. To say that, technology and the change, and how fast you can detect a signal, has become a big issue today.
Well, it's become a whole new legal minefield.
Yeah.
Because it used to be first in, best dressed. And now first in can be a millisecond.
Hmm.
It's not like we're going to race in a taxi to get somewhere. It's a millisecond away. And so when your measurements in the stock market, when you take your measurements there, it's almost crazy. It's like when they had the runs on the bank and people were outside trying to do their bit to get their money out of the bank. The banks were already emptied because somebody else already had the speed to empty them. So now you're not working in seconds, minutes, and hours. You're working in very, very small time frames, which is to your point, I think, Manu.
Yep.
And then if I applied, I think what Anne was saying, all of a sudden the rules have to change.
Exactly.
Because at this moment, you can start to see, I mean, it's happening when we look at all this buying and selling in all the different markets. They're splitting them down to margins that you couldn't even imagine 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But when they split the margin down, they have to increase the volumes. Joe, you look perplexed on that one.
No, I'm thinking about how price signals actually are still kind of how they factor in and how lag factors into that, the lack thereof. I'm just thinking.
There's hardly any lag, right?
No, there's no lag anymore.
But
and what's
it's
the
important
implication?
here,
Unless
Joe,
you're
to
private.
always think. Susan, go on first.
Those private citizens have much more lag than institutional buyers. So the rules are stacked against an individual.
Right.
Yes. I was going to come to the same point, Susan, in that the 10 years ago in terms of, and the fastest you go in terms of information process, the also deeper it goes in terms of preferential flows of energy trap, i.e. the mega billionaires of today, in that the resource flows to preferential pockets and stays there because it's just that they have a mean to appropriating it. Let's just put it that way. So you start having
Created the rules to appropriate.
So that comes back to what I don't know who made the point, but it was whoever drives the system creates the rules.
That's Henry.
That was Henry. Okay, so that what Susan just said, the system wasn't created or driven by the common man. The system is designed and driven by corporations or entities or institutions or whatever you want to call them, and the rules are not designed for the common man.
Although we're led to believe that the common beingness has the ability to make changes. And so when you're looking at it, when I was a kid, it was thought to become a millionaire would take 1 million lives to do it, in lifetimes, because it was an impossible thing. Today, you have billionaires going broke in days because of the speed. And so to me, that's just making money almost irrelevant. It's the ability to exchange and to drive the exchange is what's relevant today.
So, but what is, Kelly, then, in that what you just said before, what is anti-entropic to it?
What is anti-entropic?
Yes, and to Susan's point, because you say it's stacked against the individual. What is it? Okay, I would say it's thinking, proper thinking, because that's the only thing that cannot be domesticated or appropriated by others. So at the same time, that is, forum like this one, where we can learn together
But
how to fit.
what I think we're talking about is critical mass.
Yes.
So the critical mass of shifting something, you have to have it moving in that direction. So you have to say, like, how much of it is moving this and how easy is it to move? It's hard to move with a lack of mass.
Yes.
And so if the mass is moving with you, all of a sudden you can do just about anything. So if you go to the example of Shannon and bits, nobody knew anything to argue about whether it should be bits. So it could be established pretty well until they started to work through it. And then you had the entrepreneurs applying it and it became commercial. And it gathered mass through its monetization. So when we're looking at it and we're starting, I'm starting to look at it and say, okay, where's the critical mass heading now? I mean, what are we seeing in all of our information outlets? I mean, the information outlets right now are just jam-packed full of, viruses. I'm surprised I got this far, because there's something in the background that's in my world is like a virus. You understand my point? Things move at the speed of virus now.
Yeah.
So
Virus is front of mind at the moment.
yeah, well, but that's the point. It's got critical mass.
Yeah. And even things like global warming has taken a backseat because of that, because it's a vital now. Right now, people are seeing the effect of it, and yet global warming, we can see it, we can feel it, but it's not as targeted. It's a bigger problem. It's more complex.
I can't help but wonder how much of that is due to obfuscation and censorship and particular narratives being heavily promoted rather than our own. I'm not sure our observation is independent, is all I'm really saying.
I think you've got Susan agreeing with you.
Yeah, it's purely subjective. It always is.
Yeah.
Joe, let's finish this.
It's not a universal principle.
Yes.
Stance of this book that widely applicable answers to questions about steering complex adaptive systems can be attained only by studying the origin and the coevolution of signal boundary hierarchies. Much as the intricacies of ecosystems can be understood only by studying the origin and the coevolution of species. John Holland, Signals and Boundaries, Building Blocks for Complex Adaptive Systems. When we approach our problems.
No, keep going, we'll finish it, and that way we'll at least have finished one of our things completely. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, the chat just popped up. When we approach our problems on a universal general systems basis and progressively eliminate irrelevancies, somewhat as we peel petals from an artichoke, at each move we leave in full visibility the most important layer of factors with which we must deal. We gradually uncover you and me in the heart of now. R. Buckminster Fuller.
Comments or questions?
That's the simplest thing to understand out of the whole bloody day.
What? You happen to have an artichoke handy, do you?
Oh, geez, I'd rather peel one of them than trying to decipher what the hell's come before it.
It's almost like a tagline for our study group. We gradually uncover you and me in the heart of now.
Yeah.
And that to me, what it's all about is uncovering you and me in the heart of now. the vitalness of what we're doing. Comments or questions on anything else?
And when he talks about that statement, he's talking about first the macro, the biggest picture, setting the boundary, what's relevant, and then eliminating macro irrelevant, then going into the micro, what's relevant.
Yeah, that's why you have to have a boundary.
Yes.
I think another thing that is unfortunately the friend Steve is not here, is fractals. You know, in the maze of all the exchange and all the complexity from the dividing, one of the key principles of discovery is that peeling off and discovering that there are fractals that keep same structure and that relate neatly. You peel off artichoke, you see another artichoke until you reach probably the core or something of the sort, at which point you have to change technology. You're not peeling off anymore. Maybe you're doing something else to imagine what is in the care of that. Care is K-E-R-R in German for heart of it.
Comments or questions?
I think also what's interesting about this is he talks about peeling off layers and then being able to see more. I remember in some of the seminars we did, Robert used to say that, you know, well, I can't remember the exact thing, but I remember he'd say, you'd see a glimpse of the future, just a little bit, and it's enough to get you going to the next stage.
Yes.
And I also like, I know what you mentioned about the artichoke. As you peel it, and then you come to, you know, until the point where you can peel, then you got to figure what to do with it inside, because it's maybe it's not about peeling anymore, but then something else comes into play and it's not peeling. You know, I like that thought in itself is you know, it just opens up that part of the brain that has to figure that out.
Like kind of moving through a boundary.
And I like what Henry said in terms of, you know, what Robert says is that you just have a glimpse. That's the key of inductive risk-taking in terms of thought process. You have a glimpse like a dream and you take the jump into that. Now, it might be at the cost of your life, it might be at the cost of your reputation, it might be at the cost of something, but that is the risk that you take in terms of thinking and then expressing what you are. So a glimpse, and then you induct what the generalized or the more general relationship, I wouldn't say principle yet, relationship is.
Does glimpse now become the driver?
Yes.
So we drive, we're driving towards, I feel something, I apprehend something, I've had a small look at it, I can feel it, I can touch it, I can taste it, I can see it, yet I don't understand it. And then it drives, I mean, I know that's what drives me crazy. It's like when you get into those moments where you say, oh, geez, just a little bit more, please. And now that becomes the driver. Make sense? Comments or questions? Okay, so we might actually finish on time. Philemon, how do you feel and what do you take away?
I was hoping you weren't going to go with me first, but you did, because I feel like some Arab Bedouin on the ice skating rink after today. I didn't like today's session. I'm in massive lag of it. I dare say things will come. I don't know what will come, but it was too complex for me. The word complex was used several times. So I went 90 degrees into the noise of my mind. And while I was listening, I was just jotting down different thoughts and different notes. I really like the in-between theory. I know we talk about it often, and I really believe the magic is in between. If I'm going to tell a story, you know, this is the story, and then we went there. It's the in-between that's good. You know, in between a sandwich, you know, it's always, that's where the meaty stuff is, you know, in between the bed sheets. That's where all the action and the memories are. So it is all about the in-between. I'm really big on that. And then when we're talking about Veritas, I like some origins of words when they come from mythology, Greek and Roman, and there's always a comparison. When we look at Veritas, it's based on rightness, and Nietzsche also defined it around control and power. But when we look at the Greek alternative, Aletheia, who was the daughter of Kronos, the god of time, and virtue. And then I thought, okay. And then the Greek meaning of Veritas, which is Aletheia, which is unconcealment. And I so much like to be the word unconcealment over rightness of Veritas in that sense. Principles versus rules. We spoke within that space for a bit. I like to liken it as sport. So in soccer, there are rules. You got to play in between here. You got to score a goal. If it goes out there, it's a corner, etc., etc. But then the principles within it, we see them change all the time. The winger might jump in as fullback, and the goalkeeper might go up, in the last dying moments of the game to try to score a goal in a corner, as such. So the principles change, within sport very, very often, but not the rules as such. That's what I got, and yeah, I'm still confused. So, Joseph, how do you feel, and what did you get out of today?
So you had to come to me second. No, I enjoyed today's session. I did. It gave me I liked how Shannon's model was laid out, and understanding how a sphere works within that. So I thank you, Manu, for explaining that to me. And actually, that's something that I'm going to draw out a little bit later on this evening, or tomorrow, actually. One of the important things is something that Henry said: the driver of the system creates the rules. That's a really important thing to consider, because then we're actually governed. That shows you how these institutions are when they're creating rules and who they impact. The other idea is, we've spoken about in the past, the importance of naming something. Who gets to name something as well is really important, because then we have a common agreement about what something is, which allows it to then be used and integrated into the rest of the system itself. I'm with Philemon as well with the relationships between rules and principles. I thought about that quite a bit. That's something I think about even myself personally. How do you establish a set of principles? Then you can kind of, and then when do rules need to be changed? And when do rules need to are no longer serving their purpose anymore? And what I mean by that is that once they stop serving their purpose, then that's exactly when they need to change. So that's when, and within a system, that's important to recognize that. So those are my takeaways. Henry, how do you feel, and what are you taking away?
I'm feeling great. Interesting call. Very, very interesting, complex, informative. We touched on a lot of different things. What I do know is in Bucky talk, he talks about universal principles. Universal principles being true in all cases. So sport principles are not universal principles, because it's not necessarily true in every case, particularly if you can change it. So it's understanding the definitions and how they're relevant. Like even in sport though, gravity is universal, because the ball's always going to hit the ground regardless. Boundaries, rules, they're subjective. They're by agreement. People can change them. Boundaries are defined by, like you say, the driver. And like Kelly said, when he is running the cash flow game, Robert would do the same when he's running a room. He goes, the very first thing he'd say is, I'm the government. I own this space, and these are my rules. You play by my rules or you get out. It's as simple as that. Or you pay the fine. Define the rules. Very, very clear on how he does that. And it is by agreement. Like we talk about Shannon. Shannon said, okay, right. How about a bit? And then everyone went, oh, okay. It's all by agreement, even though it was tacit. That's the way it is. So having those distinctions and looking at it from a more solid point of view, that helps me. So I really enjoyed the call. Thanks, guys. Susan, how do you feel and what did you get out of today's call?
I feel, again, just grateful for the time together. And ever since we first started studying Bucky, I've always identified myself as a between girl. Just, whether it's Eastern medicine, Western medicine, just always I find that the most fun is in between. And now that I have Philemon in my head, it will stay that way forever. I think that what came for me that maybe the most new little bit was just that whole idea of the glimpse. I've loved talking about in Bucky terms of apprehension, and I think that's kind of what we're getting at is apprehension actualized in that glimpse. And it is I think Bucky always wondered what are humans good for? What are we here to do? And I really, the more I look at it, I'm thinking that we are creators. And we're working with what's already there, but it's our ability to bring the signal in, to aggregate, to re-aggregate, and then to lean into that apprehension into what can be next. And happy to meet you all in the heart of now. And how do you feel, and what are you going to take away?
Thank you, Susan. Okay, I'm super excited at the moment, super excited, because I literally just today's meet alone, I'm getting a lot of, it's like signals from the universe right now. Okay, there are a couple of things here. One is the whole idea of right at the very beginning when I can't recall, someone mentioned this was duodecahedron, was it? Somebody mentioned that. Was it duodecahedron or something like that, right? Yeah. So it's actually something that we're exploring in our school right now. We are working towards measuring competencies instead of measuring results academically, and this is why we are working together with people in Finland. The thing is that when you measure competency, you're dealing with a human component, right? And the human component is so complex that we realized it couldn't be two-dimensional. And right now, the assessment system is one-dimensional. And literally, when you deal with people, it's multi-dimensional. And we ended up with a shape that was like a dodecahedron. Actually, it's dodecahedron. Yes, that's the one that we came up with. And it's not just the shape on the outside, there's a lot of interconnectivity on the inside. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's something. There's a signal right there somewhere. And then the fact that it went into entrepreneurship, because our school, we started the first entrepreneur school in the country about 9 years back already. 8 years ago we started that. And because of Robert Kiyosaki, I've been doing financial education for the past 21 years with the kids. With the students, then the whole idea of duality, it's always one or the other, but the schema, I did not think of duality in a schematic for sure, all right? And the schematic actually allows that linkage between both the polars, all right, both polars. I don't know, there's so much here, and I'm going to quote you, Kelly. I'm going to quote you. The one of things move at the speed of virus. It's going to go on my Facebook, by the way. Okay. All right. And then the last bit is this: the minute you have a glimpse of the future is enough to get you moving. Yeah, that's more than enough to get me moving in many directions right now. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
And let everybody know how many students that you work with on a weekly basis.
Well, we have like right now about 3,000 students that are with us, you know, in our language centers and our 3 international schools. Over the years, I think we have actually impacted about 20,000 plus students over the years. Anyway, and we have been innovating on education. So right now we are moving into themed schools, but we were Asians, right? And you have to do it in such a way where it doesn't scare away the traditional parents, because their kids are the ones that need the most help. So we've been going into theme schools. Like the latest one we opened is this, it's on environmental sustainability. It's called Ace Adventure Biosphere. And the kids are learning by doing 10 hours a week. Learning by doing, that means that it's physics, chemistry, biology, which is very, very foreign to Asian parents. And we've got other themed schools coming up. So versus learning by linking to the real world is not the same as working in the real world as students. So that's what we're doing. Yeah. Thank you very much, Kelly, for this, as usual.
Pass it on.
Oh, yes. Then Rafis, over to you. How do you feel and what did you get from out of today?
Thank you, Anne. Actually, I feel great call. Again, I take away is again how we deal with the complexity and how we break it down into bits. So if I might use the word bits as well, and how relevant it is what we do. And one of my takeaways today is how amazing language it actually is. That is, no government, corporation, or business controls language. We all control language. But that's not to say there's not a hierarchy. That means the powerful defines what's correct language and what's incorrect language. But still, within that level of correctness or wrongness defined by the powerful, still we all manage and control how language operates, because these are agreements that have been built, I mean, over 1 million years. And that's the point we are in today. And also relate to the fact that when a culture wants to absorb or control different people, the first thing they do is destroy the language or their native language, because they understand how powerful language actually is. So you end up assimilated into another culture, and that may very well mean like killing thousands of children in Canada, for example, and not for the sake of, I don't know, dominance or colonialism, whatever you want to call it. But the people understand, we understand how powerful language is. And when you look at Trump and the shift in the language he uses, and how different words are even created every single day, and how we react to those words, and how we decide. I think in this group, we're very aware of what language we use and how we use it. And I love when Kelly, for example, fights very strongly, and I agree with him, the word mindset, because that's a very limited word, whereas we talk about mind space, or how we create an understanding of how the world relates to me and to you and to everybody else. And how language actually carries information. That's how we deal with it. And as we have integrated computers and everything else, it's all about language and how we manage it, and how we manage bits, and how we turn the bits into, I know, billions of divisions of a second, etc. But still, it's still about dealing with information, how we transmit and receive information, and again, how we educate. That's another thing I take away today is that's what we do. We are here to learn and to educate ourselves and to educate other people in how we understand Veritas, and we all seek for truth. Because that's what Veritas is all about, is understanding principles and understanding the difference between principles and rules. Principles are there for forever until we discover something else. But again, principles are based on Veritas, whereas rules they're based on our specific understanding of how we manage what we know, or how we manage power and force. So very important distinction, principles and rules. And those are my takeaways today. So Manu, how about you, mate? How do you feel? What's your takeaway?
Like a popcorn. I'm really grateful and really, really appreciated your kind of, I mean, Kelly on the describe you, really, your display, it is really, really a lot that you brought into this meeting. I'm really, really appreciative of it. Susan, as always, you know, thank you. And thank you to everybody else. What I take away here is a few, apart from a lot that has been already said by other participants, is things like that are put in there, like, you know, half cycle. Half cycle is very important. And I just know maybe this might not be clean to me or might not make any sense, but look at the transistor of 1948 and the PC in the mid 70s. Half-life cycle of a 50-year cycle. Look also at the mobile communication and the internet of things. Similar. Maybe something to titillate your brains. Maybe says anything. But I also like that the driver of a system creates, but I will add and clearly communicate the rules and be consistent in applying them, in moderating them. That's what is going to be the grace of a progress of that system. Clearly create the rules, communicate, and then apply them consistently, consistency. Also, something that I put here is in terms of complexity can only start to be comprehended and understood in terms of cycles, in terms of patterns. And cycles start with identification of pattern and they play and interplay. That's the only way we can understand. We cannot go digital on those. We measure digitally, but we comprehend in terms analogically with patterns. And I think that that's all. Kathleen, how do you feel? What do you take away?
Thank you, Manu. Thank you, everyone. I feel a bit of everything, a bit of everyone. There's parts of us still feel confused, but again, I'll bring it up as Steve said once in one of the our calls. Confusion is the beginning of understanding. So, it's like when it's knowing that I'm confused means that I will get to the point of actually understanding. It's like when I feel a bit unwell, I know that it's my body healing. It's actually rather it's nature working. So the fact that I might not comprehend everything doesn't mean that there's parts of it that I didn't apprehend it. Very grateful for Anne and actually very impressed for everything you do. You clearly are perhaps more that you could actually see of as an educator, because I can see the not only the passion, what drives you of making a difference through an individual that eventually will become the impact of thousands of others individuals that actually they inhabit Earth, spaceship, I think that's how Bucky calls it. Well, orders of factors. So thank you very much for being here, for your thoughts, for who you are, and for what you contribute to the world. Because starting in one corner of the world, it means that at least somewhere started to gather momentum. So thank you for that. And I can't really say that there's anything else I haven't said before. But one of the thoughts that I actually liked that Manu mentions on point is the chaos is just simply things that are happening. So, and again, the fact that I don't understand doesn't mean that it's that it won't happen. So, so that's me. Pete, how do you feel? What you take away?
Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm feeling a combination of grateful and confused as well. But I, like yourself, I'm okay with the confusion. Welcome, Anne. I think you're a very amazing human being. Welcome aboard. I guess where I really got sort of stuck on was, like Philemon and like a few others, was on the distinctions between rules and principles. And I have a bit of a bias against blind following of the rules in our society. And frankly, I think it's dangerous, because they did an experiment in I think it was in the 60s, and they had a guy in a lab coat tell university student volunteers they were turning a lever, and there was a guy behind the veneer, and he was getting electrocuted. And what was really scary was they did that in the 60s, and they did it again in the 90s, and they did it again recently. And in all three cases, over 70% of the population would blindly follow rules and electrocute someone to death. And that's following rules as opposed to following the principle that thou shalt not do harm.
Mm-hmm.
So that distinction of rules and principles scares me. And it also scares me from, we have lots of pollution in our world. We have pollution, litter in the street, but we have pollution. Our water is damaged, our ecosystems are damaged, the information, the microbes in the soil is damaged. There's pollution everywhere. And a very large part of that has been created by corporations who tell employees to do something. And the employees may well be scared they're not going to have a job and not have money to pay for their rent and food or whatever, but they follow the rules even when the rules are immoral. And our world is, I don't think there's a danger at all around the coronavirus to humanity. I think there's a danger to humanity around blindly following rules and people